I can still hear my sister's cries, echoing beneath the ice that night, her voice buried alongside dozens of children who were never found. No one knew that deep underground was a ghost city, and the cult's ruthless leader was my own sister, the girl who vanished from my life 18 years ago. If you think this is just another family story, you're dead wrong. Subscribe now to catch every chilling episode as we uncover the truth that will haunt you. The wind in the Ontario wilds is a sound you never forget, like the howl of something ancient, clawing at the earth, impatient, hungry. On that December morning, the Peterson family awoke before sunrise, the world outside their rented cabin a pristine, undisturbed ocean of white. Pine trees huddled close under thick coats of snow. Amanda, 15, watched her breath fog up the frosted window, her reflection framed by the ghostly blue dawn. She felt a secret thrill. Every year their hunting trips were a chance to be wild, to test herself in a world stripped bare. Today her little sister Chloe was finally old enough to join 8, gap-toothed, bundled in a ridiculous rainbow scarf, clutching her battered plush rabbit and giggling as she clambered into her snow pants. Their father Mark packed the rifles with the quiet efficiency of a man who trusts his hands more than words. Their mother Laura brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead and fussed over the girls' layers, tucking hot packs into Mitten's double-checking boots. Rex, their German shepherd, paced by the door, whining impatiently, his breath leaving delicate ghosts on the glass. In the brief hush before the day began, the Petersons gathered around the old wooden table. Chloe's eyes sparkled, cheeks rosy from the wood stove's heat, and Amanda gave her a conspiratorial wink. Mark laid out the plan. They'd follow the southern ridge break for lunch by the frozen creek, then circle back before sunset. Laura ruffled Amanda's hair. "You're my compass," she teased. "Don't let us get lost out there." Outside, the wind sang through the trees, distant and faint, like the warning you only understand when it's far too late. There was laughter, real, ringing. Chloe spun in circles on the porch, her snow boots squeaking. Rex barked, tail wagging, as Amanda zipped up her parka and slung her new camera around her neck. The forest was waiting. It always waited. The first hours were magical. Snow crunched underfoot in crystalline symphony. The girls took turns breaking trail, Amanda showing Chloe how to read the shallow depressions of rabbit tracks, how to move in silence. Mark led with practiced strides, rifle slung over his shoulder, always pausing to look back and count heads. Laura snapped photos, Chloe trying to make a snow angel, and failing, Amanda, rolling her eyes, but laughing, the sun slanting through fir branches and turning the world gold. By noon, they reached the clearing by the creek. The world was muffled, wrapped in thick layers of quiet. Amanda sat with her back against a fallen tree, peeling a hard-boiled egg, listening to the distant echo of water flowing beneath the ice. Chloe fed Rex jerky, both of them fighting over the last strip. Laura passed around cocoa in battered tin mugs, and Mark toasted the girls with a thermos of coffee. For a moment there was nothing but warmth, the easy, ordinary joy of being alive, together, alive in the wild. None of them noticed the sky begin to shift. Gray crept in on the horizon, subtle as a shadow at first, then deepening, heavy with menace. The temperature dropped. Mark checked his watch, frowned at the darkening sky, and suggested they pack up early. Laura nodded, glancing uneasily at the quickening wind, the way the light faded so much faster in winter. They made their way back along the ridge, Rex bounding ahead. The snow started gently dusting the Petersons as they trekked through the trees. Within minutes, flakes grew larger, thicker, swirling in the wind like scraps of torn cloth. Mark picked up the pace. The woods, once welcoming, now pressed in tight, dark shapes, shifting between the drifts. Amanda could feel the first coil of worry in her stomach, but Chloe's laughter, echoing reckless, cut through it, and she smiled for her sister, not wanting to break the spell. By the time they reached the camp, the snow was falling hard and fast. The world had shrunk to a handful of trees, their cabin the single yellow eye of the lantern they hung on the porch. Inside, Laura stoked the fire, wrapped Chloe in a blanket, and tried to make it feel safe. Amanda shrugged off her coat, kicked snow off her boots, her hair tangled and full of ice. Outside, the storm howled. It battered the windows, rattled the old roof, found every crack in the logs, and squeezed its chill inside. The family huddled around the fire, listening to the storm's rage. Mark reassured the girls, "It'll pass by morning. We'll dig out, maybe even build a snow fort." Laura smiled, but Amanda saw the worry in her mother's eyes, the tight line of her mouth as she checked the weather radio static, nothing else. Night fell like a shroud. The lantern flickered. The wind rose. Amanda lay in her bunk, listening to the world outside vanish under the blizzard's weight. She heard Mark pacing by the door, Rex's restless whine, Chloe's soft, contented breathing from the lower bunk. Eventually, sleep found her deep dreamless. Sometime past midnight, a noise jerked her awake. A scream, no, a shout cut short by the wind. Amanda sat up, heart thumping, and saw light dancing in the room, wild and orange. For a split second, she thought she'd dreamed it. Then the door crashed open, snow whirling and stinging her cheeks. Mark's voice, loud, desperate, calling the girls' names. Amanda scrambled for her boots. The air was so cold it stole her breath. Chloe was already up, crying, clutching her rabbit, and stumbling toward Amanda. Rex barked frantically, running in circles at the threshold. Laura's voice was a thin, high thread of panic. "Stay together. Don't let go." Outside was chaos. The camp was unrecognizable. Half-buried tent poles snapped the snowdrift, swallowing the fire pit whole. The lantern overturned, painted wild shadows over the scene. Chloe clung to Amanda's coat. Rex pressed close against their legs. The wind screamed. It was impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. Mark's voice cracked as he pointed. "The tracks, they're going into the woods." In the swirling light, Amanda glimpsed a set of footprints, hers, Chloe's, Rex's, trailing off the edge of the camp into the trees. They looked so sharp, so precise, like something pressed into the world by an invisible hand. Laura grabbed Mark's arm. "Wait the storm. It'll kill them out there." But Mark was already moving, lantern in hand, voice hoarse as he called his daughter's names, again and again, plunging into the white void. Laura followed, sobs torn away by the wind. Amanda hesitated, torn between terror and the primal need to follow. She gripped Chloe's hand, knuckles white, and together they stumbled after their parents, the storm closing around them like a fist. The woods had changed. Trees loomed monstrous in the dark, their branches creaking under the weight of new snow. The footprints twisted and doubled back, tangled with Rex's paw prints. Amanda struggled to keep her bearings, every sense on high alert. She shouted Chloe's name, her own voice snatched away. All around them, the storm was alive, howling, laughing, drowning every hope. Suddenly, Amanda realized something was wrong. The footprints, they were all there. But suddenly, as she and Chloe reached a clearing, they just stopped. No more indentations, no sign of disturbance, just untouched, perfect snow stretching into the darkness. Rex stopped, ears pricked, growling low at something unseen beyond the tree line. Panic clawed at Amanda's chest. She spun in circles, trying to see where the tracks picked up, but there was nothing. Chloe's sobs became whimpers, her face streaked with frozen tears. Amanda hugged her close, shielding her from the wind. In the distance, Mark's voice grew fainter. Laura's cries echoing hopeless. Amanda wanted to scream, but the cold stole even that from her. The trees pressed closer, their shadows growing longer as the lantern's light flickered and faded. Somewhere, everywhere, came the echo of a name, Amanda. Chloe. The storm raged on. Rex barked once, a sharp warning, then fell silent, his body tense. The world narrowed to the three of them in a sea of white, with no way forward, no way back. The snow began to fall heavier, thick enough to smother sound, to erase all trace of what had come before. Amanda knelt in the snow, pulling Chloe into her lap, searching for any sign, any hope. But there was only emptiness, a cold so deep it threatened to swallow them whole. The footprints, so clear a moment ago, blurred and vanished under a new layer of snow, as if they had never existed. Somewhere far away, Mark and Laura called for their daughters, their voices growing smaller, fainter, until the storm took them too. The clearing was silent again, as if nothing had ever happened here, as if Amanda, Chloe, and Rex had never been. The last thing Amanda saw before the darkness closed in was a flicker at the edge of her vision, a pale, shifting shape between the trees. She tried to focus, but her eyelids grew heavy, the cold numbing her mind. Chloe's hand slackened in hers. The wind died for a moment. The snow fell straight and soft. In that impossible silence, Amanda thought she heard a voice, gentle, insistent, calling from somewhere deep below the ice. Then everything went gray, and the world was gone. When the sun finally rose, it found the Peterson camp in ruins. The tracks that had led into the woods ended impossibly in the center of the forest. There was no blood, no struggle, nothing but silence and snow. In the months and years to come, the villagers would whisper about the Peterson sisters, about the storm, about the footprints that simply ceased to exist. They would say the woods took them, that the white ghost claimed what belonged to it. But on that night, all that remained was an endless, indifferent cold and the echo of voices lost to the wind. The sun rose on a world frozen solid, a silence so absolute it hurt the ears. When the first responders arrived at the Peterson camp, they found chaos entombed in ice. The snowdrifts had claimed the tents, buckled the gear beneath their weight, and wiped away almost every trace of movement. Only a few footprints remained, already blurred, disappearing into the pines where the sisters had vanished. Deputy Hank Evans, the first to reach the scene, crouched by the edge of the woods, his breath forming clouds in the morning air. He pressed a gloved hand to the ground where the tracks stopped. In all his years of search and rescue, he'd never seen anything like it. No scuffle, no drag marks, no blood. Just those footprints ending clean in the heart of the forest, as if the earth itself had swallowed Amanda, Chloe, and the dog whole. The search began in earnest within the hour. Sirens howled down the icy county roads as police, rescue workers, and neighbors poured in from every direction. Snowmobiles crisscrossed the woods, their engines snarling through the hush. Men in bright orange vests combed the undergrowth, poking through drifts with sticks and shovels, calling the girls' names until their voices cracked. The K-9 unit sniffed the air, but Rex's familiar scent vanished with the last visible prints. Overhead helicopters circled low, their rotors kicking up fine clouds of frost. But from above, the pines looked like a green and white labyrinth, no sign of life, no movement. Mark and Laura Peterson moved through the chaos like ghosts. Mark's face was ashen, jaw clenched so hard it trembled. Laura wandered the edge of the clearing, calling Amanda, Chloe over and over, each time with less hope, more terror. The rescuers tried to reassure her, but as the hours crawled by and the light faded, their words sounded thin, unconvincing. Even the search dogs' shivering whined, as if they sensed some boundary in the forest they dared not cross. By nightfall, the temperature had plunged again. Flashlights stabbed through the dark as volunteers formed lines, trudging deeper into the trees, but the snow only grew heavier, smothering all sound. The girls' footprints. Amanda's boots, Chloe's tiny tracks, the oval pads of Rex remained in everyone's minds, a puzzle without a solution. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm faded, leaving behind an even deeper silence. The news hit the town like a hammer blow. Kids from the local school clustered around each other, trading rumors in hushed voices. At Miller's General Store, the old men by the wood stove stopped playing cards and talked of nothing else. Stories began to grow. Some said they'd seen lights in the forest the night before, the flicker of lanterns, a flash of white among the trees. Others swore they'd heard howling, not from a dog, but something bigger, colder, older than any wolf. And everywhere whispers spread of the white ghost, the spirit that haunted these woods, claiming children when the snow fell hardest. Mark refused to leave the search. For days he combed the forest with the deputies, his hands numb, face raw from the wind. Laura sat by the radio in the command tent, rocking back and forth, staring at the static. On the fourth night, she slipped away and wandered the forest alone, hoping she'd hear a voice, a giggle, anything. Instead, she found nothing but darkness and the endless patient cold. The search stretched on. Local volunteers made up half the county. Posters of Amanda and Chloe. Amanda's shy smile, Chloe's toothy grin, appeared in every window. The phone rang all day in the sheriff's office with calls from psychics and self-proclaimed hunters. "Check the frozen lake," one voice whispered. "Look near the oldest pines," another insisted. They found nothing but ice and secrets. By the end of the week, the snow around the Peterson camp had been churned to mud, trampled by dozens of boots. Searchers found a single mitten with a faded rainbow and a torn bit of Rex's collar, but nothing else. It was as if the world itself had closed over the children and left only questions behind. And the fear grew. Parents who'd once let their children roam free now stood at the edge of their porches watching the tree line. Kids were warned never to go beyond the last fence post, never to walk alone at dusk. Small notices, handwritten desperate, began to appear on telephone poles and the door of the post office. Danger. Children gone missing. Do not enter woods. Some went further. The white ghost is real. Keep kids inside after dark. It wasn't just the locals who were afraid. Reporters arrived in battered vans, cameras slung over their shoulders. The Peterson story was front-page news. Ontario sisters missing in snowstorm, family dog vanished too. TV anchors stood shivering at the edge of the camp, gesturing to the trees. The sisters' faces glowed on every screen, their stories told and retold, each detail made more sensational by the hour. Chloe's plush rabbit, Amanda's battered camera, every item became a symbol. The white ghost made headlines too. A week passed. The weather grew even colder. Some searchers began to mutter about wasting time. But Mark Peterson would not give up. He led crews out at dawn, stumbling through knee-deep snow, until he collapsed. Laura tried to keep hope alive. She baked bread, left the porch light on all night, wrote letters to Amanda and Chloe in a neat, careful hand. She placed them in the girls' room, alongside their untouched beds and Rex's empty dish. Soon the search grew smaller. The neighbors returned to their routines. The officers called away to other duties. The forest, battered and trodden, healed beneath new snow. In town, life resumed, but everything was changed. Children played in smaller circles. Windows were shut tight before sunset. The old stories returned with new urgency. My grandmother saw the white ghost once, said a girl at the school bus stop. He took her cousin into the woods, and she never came back. Dad says you can hear crying at night if you listen. The years crawled by. Every anniversary, Mark and Laura returned to the camp. They rebuilt the tent, set out cocoa and sandwiches, tied ribbons to trees in Amanda and Chloe's favorite colors. Sometimes strangers appeared, curious, respectful, or just looking for a story. But the woods gave nothing back. The footprints had long ago faded. The girls' faces stayed on the missing posters. But after a time, even the ink began to run. News crews moved on to other tragedies. People married, grew old. Yet for the Petersons, and for many in town, life was split into before and after. Even the happiest moments felt half frozen. At the church on the hill, candles flickered every Sunday for the lost. There were whispers of more disappearances, shadows slipping between the trees. When a new child went missing from a neighboring village 2 winters later, panic gripped the county. Patrols increased. The handwritten warnings became official, bold black letters on white, posted at every trailhead. Caution: enter woods at your own risk. Children must be accompanied by an adult. But the fear ran deeper than warnings. It was in the way neighbors glanced at each other, in the way even adults hurried home when the sky turned gray. Some called it paranoia. Others said it was wisdom hard won by loss. At night, when the wind rattled the windows, the old stories found new life. Some families left. A few of the oldest homes stood empty, their yards overgrown, the windows boarded up. Others stayed but locked their doors with double bolts. The forest was no longer a place for laughter and adventure. It was a boundary, a border between the known and the unknowable, the safe and the haunted. Still, life endured. The Petersons grew older. Mark's hair turned gray. Laura walked with a limp from a fall on the ice. Yet every winter they stood together at the edge of the woods, calling for their daughters, their voices swallowed by the wind. Some nights, a few in the village would gather at the old bar, the air thick with wood smoke and secrets. They'd raise a glass to Amanda and Chloe and to all the lost. Then, as the hour grew late and the world outside turned white, the talk would circle back to the white ghost. The men would argue in low voices, some swearing it was only the storm, others convinced it was something older. A curse laid on the land, but always Always it ended in silence. The kind of silence that holds its breath. The kind that waits for someone, anyone, to come back from the woods and tell the world what really happened that night. But no one ever did. As the years slid by, the fear faded but never disappeared. Amanda and Chloe became legends ghosts themselves. Their story was a warning. The woods remember the cold does not forgive, and some questions should never be asked on nights when the wind is just right and the snow falls harder than it should. In the Petersons' home, 2 bedrooms remained untouched. The world moved on. But in Ontario, when the wind howled and the snow whispered against the windows, the lost girls were never far away, and neither, it seemed, was the white ghost. 18 years is a long time for a mystery to fester. And in the deep freeze of northern Ontario, memories rot slower than bodies. By 2015, the world had changed cell phones. Google Earth, missing kids on milk cartons, replaced by missing kids on Facebook. But for Josh Miller, a 42-year-old investigative journalist in Toronto, some stories remained trapped in the cold, waiting for someone stubborn enough to thaw them out. Josh lived alone in a third-floor walk-up with a cracked window that always let in too much January wind. He slept poorly, haunted by a catalog of lost faces, missing children, vanished women, names that trailed him from job to job like debts that could never be paid off. He'd built a reputation for chasing ghosts, exposing police corruption, tracking down cults, unmasking the ugly things that thrived in forgotten corners. It was lonely work, and it left its marks, faded scars on his knuckles, a twitch in his left eye, a medicine cabinet full of pills that dulled his nightmares but never erased them. That morning, the day everything changed, started like any other. Josh hunched over his laptop, sorting through leads for a new cold case podcast, when the doorbell rang, a flat, impatient buzz. He trudged down the hallway, hair unwashed, coffee mug in hand, expecting nothing but bills. Instead, he found a small brown package, unmarked, except for his name written in blocky capitals he didn't recognize. No return address. It was too heavy for junk mail, too cold for comfort. He brought it inside, slicing through the tape with a key. Inside, nestled in a nest of yellowed newspaper, lay a camera, an old Pentax battered and scarred, the leather peeling at the corners. Next to it, a siled plastic canister, undeveloped 35mm film. Josh frowned. He hadn't owned a camera like that since college. He twisted it over in his hands, heart quickening. There was something sticky on the grip sap, or maybe old blood. There was no note, no explanation. But as he held the camera up to the light, he saw a name scratched faintly into the metal: Amanda. The jolt was physical, a sucker punch to the chest. Amanda Peterson. He remembered the story from years ago, from one of the first times he'd let himself fall down the rabbit hole of missing persons forums. 2 sisters gone in a blizzard, their dog with them. Tracks ending in the snow, a whole town haunted by whispers of a white ghost. The case had slipped off the national radar after a few months, never solved, never explained. Josh called in a favor from an old friend who ran a photo lab on the Danforth. He biked the canister across town through slush and exhaust. That night, restless, he scoured the internet for anything new. Obituaries, Facebook tributes, old police reports uploaded to cold case blogs. The Peterson story was as cold as ever. Mark and Laura had moved away. The house sold to strangers, the town fading back into anonymity. But there were still forum threads, some dating back years, wild theories about trafficking, bears, cults, and always the white ghost. The next afternoon, his phone buzzed, a text from the lab. "You need to see these." Josh's pulse jumped. He rushed to the store boots, squeaking on tile, adrenaline burning off his fatigue. His friend Sandy looked nervous, chewing her lip as she handed over the envelope. "Josh, I don't know what you're working on," she said. "But these are weird." He opened the envelope and let the stack of photos slide out onto the counter. His fingers shook as he flipped through them, one by one. The first few were what you might expect: blurry images of snow and trees, a fire pit, a girl in a parka. Amanda, he guessed, older than in the missing posters, maybe 16. Her hair longer, eyes wary. Next to her, a younger girl, Chloe, unmistakably the same lopsided smile, but older, maybe 12, maybe more. The girls appeared in the forest, in a crude shelter made of logs and tarps, standing with their dog in the background. The images felt wrong, out of time. Were they staged? Were they fakes? Josh's breath caught when he reached the fourth photo. The two girls stood together, but in the background, almost hidden in the trees, was a man, tall, broad-shouldered face, obscured by a mask made of white bone or painted wood with hollow black eyes. The mask's features were stretched into a permanent grinning sneer, almost cartoonish. But in that context, it was monstrous. The figure wore a parka, but his hands were bare fingers curled as if beckoning. Every muscle in Josh's body tensed. He moved to the next photo, heart hammering. Now there were strange symbols painted in the snow spirals, runes shapes that looked like runic letters or eyes. The man in the mask appeared again, always at a distance, always watching. In one frame, Amanda was staring directly at the camera, her face half in shadow as if pleading with whoever held it. Chloe was beside her, clutching Rex by the scruff. Josh stared at the photos, mind racing. The dates printed along the margins were inconsistent, some from winter 1998, others from as late as 2003. That made no sense. The girls should have been long dead if you believe the police. But there they were, year after year, looking older, changing, surviving, or something else. He stuffed the envelope into his bag and left the lab nerves jangling. He barely noticed the subway ride home, the faces around him blurring into noise. By the time he stumbled up the stairs to his apartment, night had fallen, and he was shivering not just from cold, but from the sense that something impossible had landed in his lap. Josh spread the photos on his kitchen table, clicking through online forums, piecing together a timeline. He pored over every thread about the Petersons, every archived news article. The old details came flooding back: the blizzard, the missing dog, the abrupt end to the search. But now, armed with these photos, he started to see connections. There were stories half buried in town records about strangers in masks, about cult activity in the 1990s, about kids who vanished for a few days and then reappeared mute with fear. He tracked down old contact info for Mark and Laura Peterson, only to discover Laura had passed away from cancer 3 years prior. Mark's whereabouts unknown. Chloe and Amanda, no graves, no death certificates. Officially, they were still missing, but no one had looked for them in years. The photos gnawed at him, evidence of something that shouldn't exist. Sleep was out of the question. Josh dug deeper. He downloaded scanned police files, scoured maps, circled the coordinates from background trees and landmarks in the photos. He posted anonymous questions on Reddit, reached out to old contacts in the OPP. Each time he hit a wall of silence, or worse, the usual brush-off. That case is long dead. Miller. Let it go. But he couldn't. Not now. The Peterson story felt like a hook in his gut, an echo of another missing person he'd failed to save years ago, a friend whose trail had ended in the snow, leaving Josh with nothing but regret and guilt. He'd never forgiven himself. This felt like a second chance, even if it wasn't. Sitting at his desk, the photos spread around him. Josh finally made up his mind. He grabbed his battered duffel and a notebook packed extra batteries, a recorder, a gun he hadn't fired in years. As he zipped his parka, he caught his reflection in the cracked window, hollow-eyed, grizzled, stubborn as hell. He booked a ticket north, cold dread blooming in his chest. He knew he was heading into the teeth of something bigger than himself, something ancient and hungry. But the Peterson sisters were still out there. He could feel it. And this time he wasn't running away. He was going back into the cold, determined to find whatever waited for him beneath the frozen veil of Ontario's endless woods. The drive north felt endless. Josh Miller watched the pine forests grow thicker, the snowbanks along the road higher, until it seemed the entire world had surrendered to the hush and weight of winter. With every mile, his cell signal dropped, the radio fading from frantic Toronto chatter to static, then finally to silence. He kept the window cracked for air, but the cold cut through even his thickest layers, prickling his skin, sharpening his mind. Ontario's north always felt like a test of will, of memory, of whether you could outlast what it kept buried. He rolled into the old village just after noon, the sky a blank slate, the clouds heavy with more snow. There were fewer houses than he remembered from the maps. Most of them small and squat, their paint long since surrendered to the elements. Smoke rose from maybe half a dozen chimneys, winding up into the white. A single pickup sat outside the shuttered general store. Josh parked beside it, engine ticking, and stepped into the biting air. The first thing he noticed was the stillness and absence of laughter, of any music, even of dogs barking. A man in a plaid coat watched him from behind a gas pump, eyes narrow. Josh nodded, offering a polite greeting, but the man just looked away, lips pressed thin. At the post office, a weathered woman behind the glass slid his change back without meeting his eyes. No one spoke to him unless they had to, and every glance lingered a little too long, sizing him up as something that didn't belong. He stopped for coffee at the only diner where the old sign outside rattled in the wind. Inside, the few customers huddled over mugs, boots caked with salt. All conversation dying the second Josh entered. He ordered coffee from a teenager with a half-shaved head and a name tag that read, Carly. She eyed his notebook, then the city plates on his rental. "You're not local," she said flatly. "No," Josh admitted. "I'm a journalist." A ripple of discomfort passed through the room, as if he'd coughed up a secret no one wanted aired. Carly poured his coffee hand steady and set it on the counter. "Don't go out in those woods alone," she said quietly, eyes flicking to the door. "Not everyone comes back." Before he could ask, she was gone. Outside, a little girl in a red jacket rode past on a battered sled pulled by her older brother. Their mother watched from the porch, face creased with worry, and when she caught Josh's gaze, she shook her head, barely perceptible but unmistakable. "Don't." The message was clear in every line of her face. The warnings only made him more certain. By early afternoon, the snow began again in earnest, swirling in heavy curtains, obscuring the hills and turning the village into an island. Josh pulled on his boots, zipped his parka, and double-checked his pack flashlight recorder, the envelope of photographs, a flask for courage. He drove out of town and parked where the old fire road ended, the trailhead marked by a faded sign, half swallowed by drift. He hesitated for a moment, watching the trees sway and bow their black branches like claws against the pewter sky. It was colder here, the wind carrying the ghosts of old storms, and each gust set the pines moaning. But he pressed forward, crunching through the knee-deep snow, the memories of the Peterson girl's story burning in his chest. The forest closed in around him, the trail narrowing the world, shrinking to the bubble of his own breath. Every now and then he thought he heard footsteps behind him, his own echo or something else muffled in the snow. The woods had a way of making you feel watched, like the trees themselves were keeping tally. He passed the remnants of what might have once been a trail marker, just a scar on the bark, half hidden by lichen. Josh checked the photos again, squinting at the shapes of the trees, the angle of the light, trying to match the old images with what stood before him. It was like chasing shadows. Still, he pressed on, guided by instinct and something deeper, an ache, a hunger to know. The wind grew sharper, carrying with it a high, keening whistle that sometimes sounded eerily like a cry. Josh's breath came hard now, each exhale fogging up his glasses. He pressed deeper, remembering the details from the reports, the creek, the clearing, the place where the footprints ended. Snow hammered the world white, swallowing his tracks behind him. After nearly an hour, Josh reached a familiar hollow, a shallow dip ringed by spruce, where the snow seemed deeper and the cold more absolute. He paused, catching his breath, and scanned the ground. At first there was nothing. Then his heart leapt. Poking through the crust of ice, half buried, was a faded strip of blue fabric, maybe from a child's mitten. He crouched, brushing away the powder, revealing a worn patch of rainbow and a single letter embroidered in thread, C. His hand shook as he picked it up. Chloe's. It had to be. He remembered the photo, the same color, the same stitch. 18 years lost, and here it was waiting for him. He swept his flashlight over the snow-hard hammering. At the edge of the hollow, where the drifts grew shallow beneath the low-hanging branches, he spotted something else. A set of paw prints, almost erased, pressed deep into the ice. Too big for a fox, too round for a wolf. He crouched, feeling a wild, impossible hope surge in his chest. Could it be Rex? But the prints led nowhere, just a handful, then vanished under a new drift. He stared after them breathless, the sense of being watched returning stronger, now prickling his neck. The forest pressed in darker than before. Josh stood pocketing the mitten and moved forward, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't name. He skirted a cluster of broken branches, the snow deeper here, until his foot struck something hard. He knelt, scraping away the powder. It was a length of rusted chain, frozen in the ice, leading toward a mound of snow at the base of a fallen tree. He followed it, brushing aside drifts, uncovering what looked at first like the edge of a boulder. But as he cleared more snow, his flashlight caught the sharp edge of cut wood timbers, old and splintered, lashed together with iron bands. There, half concealed by the sweep of a pine branch, was a hatch, weathered and gray, nearly invisible unless you were searching for it. Josh's pulse spiked. He circled the hatch, brushing away years of detritus pine needles, frozen mud, the odd black feather. There were scratch marks on the wood, deep gouges that looked fresh despite the passage of time. He pressed his gloved hands to the lid and felt it give just barely a creak, lost to the moan of the wind. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to return to the village, to report what he'd found, and let someone else open this door. But this was what he had come for. The cold pressed against him, filling his mouth with the taste of metal, the sound of his own heartbeat thunderous in his ears. He listened, really listened, and for a moment he thought he heard something beneath him. A shuffling maybe, or the echo of a voice. He shone his flashlight through a crack in the hatch, but the darkness below was absolute. He fished a pry bar from his pack, wedged it beneath the edge, and heaved. The hatch came free with a groan that seemed to vibrate in his bones. A rush of air belched out thick with the scent of rot and old wet stone. The cold from below was different, ancient, biting, the kind that clings to your skin and never lets go. Josh steadied himself, looping his pack across his shoulders, and swung his legs over the edge. The world above faded away, the wind replaced by a breathless hush. He descended the rough ladder boots, scraping against icy rungs, flashlight jittering in his hand. Shadows danced up the stone walls, growing larger, stranger. The cold was so profound it felt alive, wrapping around his ribs, seeping into his heart. At the bottom, his light picked out the curve of a tunnel, rough-hewn, the walls wet with condensation, faint runes carved into the stone. He swallowed, throat raw, and pressed forward. Behind him the hatch thudded shut, snuffing out what little daylight remained. Alone now beneath a frozen world, Josh Miller set out into the darkness, chasing the ghosts that waited in the deep. And above the wind, howled through the trees, the secrets of the woods safe for a moment longer, waiting to see if he was worthy to learn what they'd hidden for so many cold, endless years. The first sensation was the cold, different from the biting wind above. Down here it was dense, hungry, a chill that pressed through layers that licked at bone. Josh Miller crouched, his boots scraping on ancient stone, his breath pale in the tight beam of his flashlight. The air tasted of mold rust and something sweet, like the after-smell of old blood. The tunnel ahead bent to the right, its walls rough, carved by hands that hadn't cared for neatness. A drip echoed somewhere ahead, regular as a heartbeat. He moved slowly, shoulder brushing the cold, damp stone. The beam of his flashlight swept along the wall, illuminating details, runes, scratched in with something sharp. Patterns, repeating circles around crude eyes, jagged stars, spirals. Someone had drawn a row of stick figures, children, he guessed, holding hands in a crooked line, their faces made of empty circles, each mouth a round O. Next to them, animals, a dog with a blue crayon collar, birds that looked more like X's, with wings, a moose with 3 legs. All of it childish, frantic, crawling across the stone. At some point, the wall turned slick, the art fading into water stains and frost. Josh passed the broken skeleton of a cot, the metal rusted and cold, a moldy blanket twisted in a heap. He shined his light into small alcoves, tiny cell-like rooms, some barely large enough to stand in. He counted 5, 6 more, each one marked by its own symbols, a handprint, a sun, a snowflake, a mask. On the floor of one cell lay a worn stuffed animal, once a rabbit, now barely more than a tangle of cloth and buttons. He crouched, reaching for it, but the chill in the air warned him off. He left it there, unwilling to disturb whatever memory it kept. A distant voice reached him so faint, he thought it must be his own mind. But then it grew a murmur, then a breath of music, singing. Not happy, not sad, but flat, relentless, and cold. A melody without comfort. He pressed deeper, his light flickering. Batteries dying or something else at work. The air thickened, and the ground underfoot became sticky mud or something worse. He rounded a bend and stopped, heart pounding. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a chamber, the ceiling lost in shadow. On the far wall, a crude altar had been built from ice blocks and slabs of old wood. Candles guttered in the gloom, their flames tiny pinpricks in the dark. Behind the altar, the walls were covered floor to ceiling with more drawings, hundreds, maybe thousands. Children, dogs, birds, spirals, faces with hollow eyes, always a mask somewhere lurking in the background, always that leering, toothy smile. As his eyes adjusted, Josh realized he was not alone. Huddled on the far side of the chamber were people 5, maybe 6, maybe more, drawn close to the warmth of a single space heater, their skin-pale eyes enormous in their sockets. They looked at him not with surprise, but with a kind of dull resignation, as if they'd been waiting. One woman clutched a child to her chest. A boy with matted hair rocked back and forth, humming to himself. Every face was etched with terror, but it was old, fossilized, not the fresh kind. Josh raised a hand, palm-open voice, barely a whisper. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Josh." His words skittered around the room, looking for a place to settle. The woman shrank away, covering her child's ears. A man in a filthy parka stared through him, not blinking, as if he were already dead. He took a step forward. The floor crackled with old frozen blood. A shadow detached itself from the group, moving with a strange stiffness. It was a teenage boy, face smudged with dirt, mouth a thin, silent line. He looked at Josh, then at the flashlight, then jerked his head down the next tunnel. "Go," the boy whispered, voice a ghost of a sound. "They'll come if you stay," who Josh breathed. But the boy just turned away. The song grew louder now, a chorus echoing up the tunnel from deeper below. The words were indistinct, half in English, half in something older, a language built from wind and pain. The notes twisted together, bright and sharp, each syllable like a shard of glass. The people in the chamber hunched down, covering their ears. The child began to cry, soft at first, then louder, the sound swallowed by the song. The air shifted. Light appeared at the far end of the tunnel, a sickly yellow, too steady for fire, too soft for daylight. Josh tried to move, but the dread that filled the chamber pinned him in place. Footsteps clicked on the stone, slow, deliberate. He wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. From the tunnel emerged 2 figures, their faces hidden by rough woven scarves, their eyes invisible behind mirrored glasses. One carried a baton, the other a lantern. They moved with the silent authority of prison guards, their postures rigid every step in time, with the hymn that drummed against the stone. As they entered the chamber, the people by the heater shrank back. The woman clutched her child tighter. The teenage boy vanished into a side corridor. Josh felt the flashlight slip in his grasp. He tried to speak, but his mouth was dry. The guards saw him, and in a single practiced movement closed the gap, seizing him by the arms. He struggled, pure panic, animal fear. But they were stronger than they looked, silent as the snow outside. The lantern swung, lighting his face, and they searched his eyes for something, a sign of defiance, maybe, or of surrender. He gave them neither. "Who are you?" he managed, but his voice was lost beneath the next verse of the hymn, a line that made the skin crawl, too perfect, too cold. They pulled him from the chamber down another tunnel that twisted and sloped. The air grew thicker, the stone walls close and slick with condensation. The hymn followed, bouncing off the walls, gathering strength with every turn. At times it sounded like children's voices, at others like old women. He tried to memorize the path, but each corner felt the same, every landmark erased by darkness and fear. They passed more doors, some open, some closed behind, which he heard shuffling, sniffling the occasional soft moan. Josh caught glimpses of faces through slats, a man with a bandaged head, a woman clutching a tattered blanket, a pair of hands scrawling symbols on the walls in charcoal. He wanted to reach for them to ask what had happened, but the guards gripped him tighter. At last they reached a wider room, the center, he guessed, of this buried labyrinth. The ceiling here was arched-ribbed, like the belly of a beast, and in the middle sat a dais of stone and ice surrounded by benches. A fire burned in a shallow pit, smoke barely venting through a crooked chimney above. Around the room, candles burned in glass jars, each marked with symbols, spirals, masks, a tree with roots that curled down like claws. From the far end, a line of figures emerged, robed, masked, their faces blank behind painted wood. They hummed with the song, their voices melding into a single chilling note. At their center stood a woman in a white robe, her face hidden, hands folded before her. She lifted her head. The guards forced Josh to his knees. The hymn swelled, a wall of cold music pressing into him, threatening to break him apart. Every muscle screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The woman spoke a single word, crisp, unmistakable. "Welcome." And in the echo of her voice, the hymn twisted into silence, leaving only the sound of the fire's hiss and the slow, steady drip of water melting from the ceiling. The underground city waited, watching a secret finally disturbed, uncertain if Josh was its next victim or its first intruder in years. They forced Josh to kneel on the frozen stone, the guard's grip like iron on his shoulders. His knees throbbed from the cold, his breath steaming in the shadows of the underground cathedral. Overhead, the ceiling arched away into darkness, thick with candle smoke and ancient secrets. The air hummed with a music that was barely music, a low chant almost subsonic vibrating in Josh's ribcage. He heard the soft rustle of robes, then silence, total, expectant. From the dais, a figure stepped forward. She wore white, her robe catching the glow of the fire and reflecting it like ice. Her face was hidden by a carved wooden mask, painted white, streaked with silver and blue, its mouth frozen in a neutral line. Two pale hands extended from her sleeves, fingers thin and elegant. She raised one, and the chanting ceased. The guards released Josh, stepping back into the gloom. He stayed on his knees, fighting for calm, forcing his eyes to meet the mask. The woman's presence was magnetic, a cold authority radiated from her, impossible to ignore. The way she stood, the careful economy of her gestures, the confidence in her silence, she was a leader, and she knew it. "State your name," she said. Her voice was low, steady, untouched by the damp chill. Josh swallowed, throat raw. "Josh Miller. I'm a journalist." The woman's head tilted as if tasting the weight of his words. She made a small motion, and the guard stepped further back. "And what brings you to our sanctuary, Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller, what did you hope to find under the ice?" He hesitated, the photos burning in his mind. He saw Amanda at 15, awkward and hopeful. Chloe's beaming grin, Rex bounding at their feet. He remembered the legends, the pain in Mark Peterson's eyes, the years lost to silence. "I'm looking for the truth," Josh said, his voice stronger than he expected. "About Amanda and Chloe Peterson. About the children who never came home." The mask regarded him, unmoving. Then, with a deliberate slowness, the woman reached up and unhooked the straps at her jaw. The mask slipped free and Josh's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, but in a way that felt almost inhuman. Her skin pale as frost, cheekbones, sharp eyes, a pale, impossible blue that seemed to reflect the torchlight. There was a scar along her temple, half concealed by her hair, and her mouth was set in a line so firm it looked like it might never have learned to smile. But it was her eyes, the recognition in them, the fleeting hunted sadness that nearly undid Josh. "Amanda," he whispered. She did not flinch. "That name is dead," she replied quietly. "You are not welcome here, Josh Miller. You don't know what you're playing with." He pushed himself upright, muscles screaming, unable to tear his gaze away. "You're alive. After all these years, people need to know what happened. Your family, your sister." Amanda's jaw tightened. "Chloe is safe. She is as she must be. The outside world would only destroy her. Here under the ice, we are protected." Josh shook his head. "Protected from what I've seen, the survivors terrified, half-starved, clinging to the walls. There's nothing safe about this place. You're holding people here against their will. Amanda, this isn't you." Her gaze sharpened. "You know nothing about me. Not anymore." She stepped closer, her robe whispering over the stone, and for an instant he glimpsed the tattoo on her wrist, a spiral encircling a broken sun. When the storm came, the world abandoned us. Up there, the rules are built on lies and betrayal. Down here, beneath the ice, we remember what the world forgot. We survive. He struggled to find words. This is survival rituals, masks, prisons. You're following something, someone. We follow the only law that matters. Amanda interrupted, voice clipped. The cycle under the ice. The white ghost is not a monster. It's a guardian. The world above rejected us. The snow takes the weak. But here we keep the old ways. Suffering, endurance, unity. It's the only truth that lasts. Josh stared at her, horror warring with grief. You're talking about a cult, Amanda. You're their leader. You're keeping people in the dark, literally and figuratively. You were a child once. Don't you remember who you were? Mark and Laura's daughter, Chloe's big sister. You used to build snow forts, make up stories by lantern light. That can't all be gone. For the first time, something flickered in Amanda's eyes, a glimmer of doubt of a wound not yet scarred over. Her lips parted as if to answer, but she caught herself, drew in a sharp breath, and hardened. That life ended the night the world forgot us, she said. Above, children vanish, and no one remembers their names. Down here, we don't let go. Pain is memory. The cycle continues always so that the next storm will not find us unprepared. Josh took a step forward. There's a way out. For you. For Chloe. Let me help you. Amanda's face twisted a strange combination of pity and anger. You still think in lines, not circles? You see the world as a thing to fix, not a wound to carry. You have no idea what's coming, Josh. If you interfere, you endanger everyone here, including Chloe. He shook his head, voice hoarse. I won't leave her. I won't leave you. You don't have to do this. You're not a ghost, Amanda. You're alive. You can still come back. You can... She regarded him for a long, brittle moment. You misunderstand, Josh. Down here, I am the white ghost. I am the storm that keeps this place whole. A guard stepped forward at her signal hand on Josh's shoulder. If you stay, you will become one of us, or you will die beneath the ice. If you leave, forget what you saw. Amanda's eyes found his one last time, and for an instant he saw the little girl she once was, lost, frightened, waiting for rescue that never came. Then she turned away, her robe billowing the mask returning to her face. The guards dragged Josh back, the music resuming colder than before. In the echo of the hymn, Amanda's voice lingered, a warning, a promise, a curse. Beneath the ice, nothing is ever truly lost, only changed, only reborn. Josh's world became a corridor of flickering shadows and footsteps that seemed to multiply behind him. The guards led him away from the great chamber, their gloved hands gripping his arms in silence. At each turn, echoes twisted off the walls as if the tunnels themselves were repeating his own heartbeat back at him. Somewhere ahead, the hymn still haunted the stone, but fainter now, replaced by the low buzz of whispered questions, doors closing, suspicion rising. After what felt like a maze of turns, they stopped before a thick wooden door, painted with the symbol of a broken circle. The younger guard knocked once, and the door creaked inward. Inside the room was small a cell lined with old furs and thin mattresses, the air sharp with the scent of mothballs and cold earth. A single lantern burned on the floor, painting gold against the rough-hewn wall. In the corner sat a girl. No, not a girl, Josh realized, but a young woman, perhaps 25, her hair a tangled cascade, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She rocked slightly, humming a tuneless melody under her breath, eyes glazed and unfocused. She wore a thick, hand-knit sweater, several sizes too large, sleeves bunched at the wrists, the color faded to a pale wintry blue. Around her neck, on a fraying ribbon, hung a necklace, a tiny silver heart dulled with age. Chloe, the guard announced, softly, as if afraid of shattering something fragile. The young woman paused in her rocking and looked up, her gaze meeting Josh's with blank uncertainty. For a moment he glimpsed the echo of the child from those old photographs, Chloe wide-eyed and mischievous, laughing in the snow beside Rex and Amanda. But now her eyes held no recognition, only the dull reflection of the lantern's light. The guard stepped back and closed the door, leaving Josh alone with Chloe. He crouched, careful to keep his movements slow, gentle. "Chloe," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "My name is Josh. I'm here to help you." She stared at him, her lips working as if to shape words she couldn't quite remember. He reached into his coat, withdrawing the faded mitten, the patch with the rainbow sea found in the snow above. He held it out, palm up. For a long moment, she simply stared. Then slowly, she reached out and brushed the wool with trembling fingers. Her mouth fell open. Josh thought he saw something pain-hope flicker in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He tried again. "You had a dog," he said, voice thick. "Rex. He was your best friend, remember? He used to chase you around the woods. Amanda, your sister, she'd shout at him to behave and you'd laugh and hide behind her. You used to wear that sweater on Christmas mornings. Laura would braid your hair." Her eyes widened, a ripple of confusion passing through her features. She pressed the mitten to her cheek. "Rex," she whispered the word, more breath than sound. Her gaze darted to the necklace at her throat, then down at the floor as if memory were a wound too deep to bear. Josh pressed forward, voice barely above a whisper. "You went out hunting that day. A storm came. You got lost in the snow. Amanda protected you, held you close. Your parents, Mark and Laura, they searched for you for years. They never stopped hoping you'd come home." Chloe blinked as if fighting through heavy fog. "Home," she echoed, tears pooling at the corners of her eyes. Then abruptly, she curled into herself, knees to chest rocking harder. "Don't remember. Don't remember. Not safe to remember." He watched, heartbreaking. She'd been kept in darkness too long. Memory was danger here. Still, he tried, desperate to reach her. He set the mitten, a crumpled photograph, and a tiny patch of Rex's old blue collar on the floor between them. "They're part of your story," he urged softly. "You're Chloe Peterson. Your sister is Amanda. Your mother sang you to sleep every night. This place, these people, they're not your family." "Not really." Chloe's hands hovered over the photograph. She picked it up, eyes searching the blurred shapes, Amanda's arm around her, Rex's tongue out, snow falling in the background. Her lips trembled. "Amanda." The word was a question, a plea, a memory fighting its way through scars. Josh nodded. "Amanda loves you. She never stopped. She's still here, she's not lost, and neither are you. You can come back, Chloe. You can." But Chloe's face twisted with fear. She shoved the photograph away and curled tighter, whispering to herself, "Don't let them see. Don't let them know. The white ghost will be angry. No questions. No past." A crash from the corridor jolted them both. Shadows swept under the door. Voices murmured, urgent and low. Josh glanced up. He could hear the guards talking, another set of footsteps, harder, heavier. He felt the shift, the way the underground city seemed to contract around him. He knew he was running out of time. He leaned in, voice low, urgent. "Chloe, listen to me. There's a way out. I promise. I'll get you out of here. But you have to trust me. Remember your real name. Remember Amanda. Remember Rex. Hold on to those things. They'll bring you home." Chloe's eyes darted to the door. She nodded once, barely perceptible, but in that tiny motion Josh saw the glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, a fracture had opened in the wall built by years of fear. He wanted to say more, but the handle rattled the door, swinging open with a bang. 3 cult members in white masks stood in the threshold, their bodies tense, postures rigid. One pointed at Josh. "He's not supposed to be alone," the man barked. "The prophet said he is to be watched. He's the outsider. The cycle must not be broken." Josh raised his hands, forced a steady breath. "She's just a girl. I'm not doing anything wrong." The man in the mask leaned closer, his voice like crushed ice. "You know nothing about what she is. She is the sacred memory. If you fill her head with lies, there will be consequences." Josh's chest burned with fury and helplessness. "She's not your prisoner. She's not your ritual. She's a person, a daughter, a sister. She deserves to be free." A hand clamped down on his shoulder, pulling him to his feet. As he was dragged out, He caught Chloe's eyes, saw the war between fear and longing raging in their depths. She clutched the mitten to her chest, rocking faster, the photograph pressed to her heart. "Rex," she whispered. "Amanda. Snow. Home." The door slammed shut. Josh was shoved down the corridor, the walls pressing in the eyes of the cult everywhere. Tension crackled in the air. He knew the clock was ticking now. The city beneath the ice was waking to his presence, the old order threatened by new memories. Chloe had remembered enough to be dangerous, and Josh understood with the sick certainty of someone who's run out of second chances. That if he failed, both of them would vanish in the cold, forgotten by the world, above consumed by the secrets below. Night came to the city beneath the ice with a suffocating heaviness, as if the whole world was pressing down, trapping every secret, every desperate hope. The candles flickered their smoky light, painting the stone corridors with long, trembling shadows. Above, somewhere far beyond reach, the blizzard raged on. But below, a different storm gathered, one made of whispers, suspicion, and memories that refused to stay buried. Chloe sat in her cell, clutching the faded mitten and the scrap of blue collar, her breath quick and shallow. The walls seemed to pulse, closing and echoing voices she tried to silence. But the more she fought, the less control she had. The present kept slipping, and the past, her real past, began to force its way back. It started with flashes, snow swirling around her, the shriek of the wind, Amanda's hand tight in hers. Rex, the dog, barking furiously, teeth bared against something in the darkness. Chloe remembered running ice cracking beneath her boots, the taste of blood in her mouth, the rough scrape of Amanda's coat as she was pulled to safety. She remembered the cold, a cold so deep it felt like it had seeped into her bones forever. Then a flash of torchlight, masks, looming hands, grabbing voices chanting in a language she couldn't understand. Fear so raw, it was almost holy. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the memories kept coming. Huddled in the dark, listening as Amanda whispered stories to her stories to make the monsters go away, even as the monsters pressed in. The room full of children, all silent, all terrified, the old woman in the mask, reciting the cycle under the ice. Chloe felt the bite of rope on her wrists, the cold of the stone at her back, the way Amanda would find her in the night, wrap her in that blue sweater, sing so softly only Chloe could hear. Tears stung her eyes as she remembered Rex leaping between her and a masked figure, a growl turning to a yelp, blood blossoming on white snow. Amanda screaming, Chloe's own voice lost. Then nothing. Just the numbness that had followed the erasing fog, the voice in her ear. Forget. For your own good. Forget. When the door creaked open, Chloe jerked upright, the past and present colliding so hard it made her gasp. Josh slipped inside, tense eyes darting. He moved quickly to her side, voice urgent but careful. "They're getting suspicious. We don't have much time." He pressed something into her hand, a crumpled map, lines drawn in shaky pencil. "There's a way out through the old storage tunnels. Some of the survivors used it before, but no one's tried since Amanda took control. If we wait for the change of guard, we can slip away." Chloe stared at him, still shaking. "I remember things now. Not everything, but enough. Amanda tried to protect me. She always has." Josh nodded. "She still is in her way. But this place, it's killing you, Chloe. We have to go. Tonight." They kept their voices low, watching the shadows under the door. Through the thin walls, Chloe heard movement, guards. Cars, boots, voices trading news. The tension was different tonight, brittle, high-strung. The prophet Amanda had sensed danger, her voice sharper than usual in the great chamber, demanding loyalty, questioning the children about strangers. Josh's arrival had upset the old order, and the cult's fear was becoming violence. Later, as they waited for the right moment, Chloe crept along the edge of the hall, heart pounding. She caught snatches of a conversation, Amanda's voice muffled but unmistakable, arguing with an older acolyte. "She's my sister. She's not to be touched. Do you understand? It's the law. She is the sacred memory. If the outsider poisons her mind, I'll handle Chloe. No one else. If she runs, it's on me." Chloe pressed her ear to the wall, tears running cold. Even after everything, Amanda was still shielding her enduring suspicion, holding back the worst of the cult's punishments. For the first time, a tiny hope bloomed. By some, maybe Amanda wasn't lost entirely. Back in her cell, she told Josh, her voice trembling. "She's afraid. She's doing this to keep me safe, but she's trapped too." Josh squeezed her hand. "That's why we have to go. We can help her, but not from inside a cage." A bell tolled in the distance, announcing the night watch. Time was running out. The old fear welled up, but with it came resolve. Josh outlined the plan. They would wait until the guards rotated 30 seconds of confusion when the main tunnel went dark just enough to slip into the maintenance passage. From there, they'd follow the map past the generator room through a sealed door to a forgotten ladder that led up toward the ruins of an old ice house. The tension in the tunnels thickened. Whispers snaked through the darkness, rumors of rebellion punishments for anyone caught planning escape. Chloe heard the scuffle of feet, muffled weeping in distant rooms, the guards' voices rising and falling in angry waves. A group of robed cultists swept through searching cells, barking questions. Chloe clutched the mitten and Rex's collar, whispering Amanda's name like a prayer. At last the bell chimed. Josh slipped out first, eyes fixed on the map, every muscle taut. Chloe followed, feet silent on the stone heart, pounding so loud she feared the guards would hear. The corridors twisted, grew narrower, colder. They crept past a storage room where old toys lay piled in crates, dolls, missing eyes, torn storybooks, a sled with rusted runners. Evidence of the lost years, proof that other children had come and gone. Down another hall, Josh paused, listening. The cult was searching rooms, their suspicion burning, but hadn't yet realized the prisoners were missing. The moment would not last long. He found the hatch, a low iron door half hidden behind broken crates. He yanked it open, the hinges squealing in protest. "Go," he hissed. Chloe hesitated. A wave of terror washed through her memories, and present blurring. But then she thought of Amanda's voice, the dog's bark, the feeling of the sun on her face, a life before the dark. She crawled through Josh, close behind. The tunnel was tight-lined with frost, the air sharp with old chemicals and mold. In the dark, Chloe found strength she didn't know she had. They crawled for what felt like hours. Above them, alarms began to wail, voices shouting orders. Josh urged Chloe on every muscle, screaming, the weight of the earth pressing down. Behind them, the city beneath the ice was waking in anger. Amanda's scream, "Don't hurt them!" echoed down the stone, filled with fury and heartbreak. Chloe looked back once, but the dark swallowed everything. Ahead, a shaft of blue moonlight. The exit, the first air she'd tasted in years. Chloe gripped Josh's hand, her heart racing. The escape had begun, but the danger was only just awakening. And as she crawled toward the unknown, Chloe carried the truth. Memory could be a weapon, and hope was the only fire that survived beneath the ice. The first shriek echoed through the frozen corridors, not human, but something deeper, a signal, a siren that summoned the cult's fury like blood in the water. Josh felt it in his bones, a rumble in the walls. Then the answering chaos, running feet slamming doors, torches flaring along the branching stone arteries. In the dark, Chloe gasped, clutching the mitten to her chest, eyes wide as terror and memory collided. The cult's chant rose behind them, a jagged, inhuman sound, hungry for vengeance. "We have to move," Josh whispered, pushing Chloe ahead, the stolen map slick with sweat in his trembling hands. Every tunnel looked the same, curved, carved by decades of fear, splitting and converging at odd angles. The alarm bells hammered the air, joined by the shouts of pursuers. At them, they can't escape. The cycle must not break. Somewhere behind, Amanda's voice cut through the tumult, sharp as a blade. "Don't let them reach the surface. Stop at nothing." But beneath her command was a tremor, a sorrow that threatened to break through the steel. Chloe stumbled, her knees scraped raw by stone. Josh yanked her upright, refusing to let panic slow them. Around them, the earth groaned. The old city beneath the ice was not just waking, it was collapsing, years of damp and neglect finally surrendering to chaos. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling, a cloud of dust choking their path. At each intersection, Josh hesitated, left or right, up or down. He chose at random, the map, now useless, the way ahead decided by terror and instinct. Suddenly, from the gloom, a flash of movement, eyes reflecting gold in the beam of Josh's flashlight. Chloe gasped, nearly collapsing. But then she saw what Josh did, a lean, grizzled dog fur streaked with white, one ear torn. Rex. He stood wagging his tail, once a gesture, as calm as it was miraculous, then turned trotting into a side tunnel. For a moment, time froze. The dog's body was battered but strong, his eyes holding a fierce, urgent intelligence. Chloe barely dared to hope. "Rex," she whispered, her voice cracking. The dog paused, barked once sharp, certain, then vanished around the corner. Josh didn't hesitate. "Follow him," he hissed, dragging Chloe in pursuit. They plunged into a tighter corridor, Rex's footprints barely visible in the damp dust. Behind them, the shouts grew closer, Amanda's voice now hoarse, desperate. "Chloe, stop! Don't do this!" They skidded around a collapsed archway, stones tumbling underfoot. A wall of darkness loomed a dead end. Josh's stomach dropped. But then Rex appeared again, pawing at a crumbling grate low on the wall, barking twice. Josh knelt, hands numb, and heaved the iron aside, the metal groaning in protest. A narrow tunnel yawned beyond, black and fetid, but on the other side, faint blue moonlight, the promise of air. As Chloe crawled through, the ground shook, and the walls above groaned, then splintered stones raining down. A roar of cultists burst into the chamber. Amanda led them, masked, discarded face contorted with anguish and rage. Her robe was torn, her hair wild, her pale eyes locked on Chloe. "Stop!" she cried, voice broken. The other cultists fanned out, blocking every other exit. Amanda stepped forward, hands shaking not with fear, but with the impossible weight of choosing between the law she'd built and the blood she could not abandon. Chloe crawled free, turning to face her sister. "Amanda, please, you don't have to do this. You're not their ghost, you're not their prophet, you're my sister. We can go, all of us. Leave this place behind." Amanda's fists clenched at her sides, her breath ragged. She shook her head once, as if trying to silence the voices that lived in her skull. "You don't understand, Chloe. I've kept you safe because I had to. Because I'm the only one who could. If I leave, if I let you leave, they'll hunt you. They'll never stop. The cycle. It's all they know." Josh stepped forward, bruised and bleeding. "Amanda, you can break it. Right now, you can come with us. You don't have to be alone. Whatever happened before, whatever you did to survive it, ends here." For a moment, Amanda looked lost, the woman and the child warring behind her eyes. Her voice dropped soft as snowfall. "I tried, Josh. I tried so hard to keep her whole. But they broke her. They broke me. The ice, it gets in your blood, it freezes everything you are." Chloe reached for her, tears streaking her dirty face. "We can heal? Please. I remember now, you carried me, you fought for me. You saved me. Save yourself." But Amanda recoiled as if struck, anguish twisting her features. "I can't. If I leave, all of them will fall apart. The city will collapse. The cold will take everyone. I have to stay." Rex whined, pushing between the sisters. Amanda's hand trembled as she touched his head. For a heartbeat, her eyes softened. "Take her. Take Rex. Get out. Don't look back." Chloe sobbed, refusing to let go. "I love you, Amanda. Please, just once, choose yourself. Not the cycle, not the pain. Us." A cacophony of footsteps thundered behind Amanda, the cultists surging, desperate to restore order. Amanda's mask of authority returned. She whirled, arms outstretched, blocking the tunnel with her body. "Go!" she screamed at Josh and Chloe. "Now, before I change my mind." Rex barked, leading the way. Josh pulled Chloe through the grate as the first stones fell behind them, the tunnel trembling with the force of Amanda's last stand. Chloe's sobs echoed down the crawl space as the cult's wails rose to a fever pitch. At the far end, the tunnel exploded into the frozen air, the world above, blinding, silent, and impossibly wide. Chloe collapsed into the snow, the dog beside her, Josh's arm wrapped around them both. They looked back only once through the ruined hatchway. Amanda's silhouette stood alone, the last line between them and the darkness, between love and damnation. She did not follow. The city beneath the ice shuddered as the cycle broke, and the sisters' story twisted toward a new, uncertain dawn. The world beneath the ice was coming undone. It began as a low, shuddering groan that ran through the ancient tunnels, like a living thing, stone grinding against stone, the old supports surrendering at last to years of rot and pressure. In the frantic moments after Josh and Chloe crawled through the grate, that sound rose into chaos. Dust sifted from the ceilings, then a chunk of wall crashed down, shattering a lamp and plunging the passage into stuttering darkness. Alarms wailed, no longer the cult's sacred siren, but a raw animal sound of panic. Water, cold, merciless, began to seep in through unseen cracks, threading rivulets along the floor, growing faster, deeper, louder. Chloe hesitated, looking back, tears streaming across her frozen cheeks. Behind her, the wailing and shouting grew, desperate survivors and cultists alike, all sense of order gone. Amanda's silhouette flickered in the ruined hair, wild face streaked with ash and grief, still holding the line between the chaos and the last thin hope of escape. Josh felt the cold seeping through his boots, climbing his legs. But he knew there was no time left. "Chloe, we have to go." He gripped her arm, but she pulled away for one last look at her sister. Their eyes locked, so much unsaid, so much lost in the chasm between them. Amanda Chloe's voice was barely more than a whisper, ragged with heartbreak. Amanda met her gaze, every ounce of love and regret pouring from her. "Go. Take care of her, Josh. Take care of Rex. Tell the world the truth. Promise me don't let the cold win." A deafening crack split the air as the ceiling above Amanda began to cave. A spray of ice and debris rained down, water surging in waves, now swallowing the stones. The old altar, the painted walls of children and animals, hope and memory mingling in the rising flood. Amanda turned away from the exit and ran back toward the inner chambers, calling to the weakest, those too terrified or broken to move. Her voice echoed fearless and clear. "This way, hurry." Josh saw cultists struggling against the current, some clawing for the ladders, others lost in the dark. Amanda pushed them forward, dragging the injured, lifting a crying child into her arms. She became the shepherd in the storm, the only anchor of order as the city beneath the ice began its final collapse. In that moment, she was neither prophet nor ghost, but Amanda, the big sister, the girl who had once built snow forts and promised to keep Chloe safe from monsters. Chloe tried to rush back, but Josh pulled her close, voice choked. "You have to let her go, Chloe. She made her choice." Rex whined, his fur slick with icy water, nudging Chloe's leg, as if to anchor her in the present, to remind her that the living still needed saving. Together they stumbled down the passage, cold water rising to their knees, the air thick with dust and dread. At every step, Chloe looked back, eyes pleading for one last glimpse. Amanda appeared once more in the shattered corridor. She pushed the last of the survivors through a side passage, then turned back toward her sister. For a single suspended heartbeat, time froze. The two sisters reached for each other. Across the swirling dark, the world narrowing to a tunnel of memory, forgiveness, and sorrow. Amanda's lips moved a silent, "I love you," her eyes burning with pride and pain. Then a roar split the chamber, and the ceiling collapsed. Josh grabbed Chloe, shielding her, as a tidal wave of ice water smashed through the hall. The ground lurched, sending them stumbling forward, Rex barking frantically, leading the way to the faint glow of moonlight at the end of the passage. Each step was agony, frozen feet, splinters of debris, the terrifying pull of the water. Behind them, the world of the cult dissolved in a final echoing crash. Amanda's shape vanishing into the darkness, claimed at last by the city she refused to abandon. The tunnel narrowed, choking with rubble. Josh fought to keep Chloe upright, his breath, ragged muscles screaming. Just a little further. "Don't stop." Chloe clung to him, Rex nipping at their heels, every instinct in the dog straining for freedom. They crashed through the last broken door out into the open, collapsing on the bitter frozen ground as the tunnel behind them collapsed, swallowing the world beneath the ice. For a long, shuddering moment, none of them moved. The cold outside was fierce, but it was the cold inside that was hardest to bear, the knowledge of who had been left behind, the weight of a promise barely kept. Chloe looked at Josh, her lips, blue tears frozen to her cheeks. "She saved them. She saved us." Josh could only nod his own grief, locked behind a wall of exhaustion and awe. They looked back once at the ruined entrance now. Nothing but a jagged mouth in the white. No sound came from below. Only the wind swirling over the snow, carrying Amanda's voice strong, defiant, loving out into the world above. Rex whimpered softly, pressing close to Chloe, who clung to him, as if to a piece of her own soul. In the end, Amanda was neither villain nor savior, but both the one who chose to stay behind, who carried the cold, so that others might know warmth again. Her sacrifice was the final act that shattered the cycle, a sister's love, echoing forever under the ice. Josh wrapped his coat around Chloe and pulled her close to not, their breaths mixing in the dawn air. They were free, but not unscarred. They were alive, but forever changed. And somewhere in the darkness, Amanda's memory lingered, last seen as a shadow in the storm, a guardian in the city that was no more. The world above greeted them with a silence so total it almost hurt. A silence broken only by Chloe's ragged breathing, Rex's whimpering, and the frantic thud of Josh's heart in his ears. Snowflakes spun wildly in the moonlight, glittering around the three survivors as they collapsed just beyond the mouth of the ruined tunnel. Their hands clawed at the powder, desperate to believe it was real. For a dozen desperate heartbeats, none of them could move. The air was so sharp, it burned. Chloe's first breath outside the city under the ice was a sob full of pain and raw astonishment. She curled against Rex, her voice thin, half-choked. "Amanda, Amanda!" It was a cry that cut through the cold, so full of longing and loss. It seemed to echo for miles across the empty woods. Her hands trembled as she tried to stand, stumbling as if she could still reach her sister by sheer force of will. Josh pulled her gently back, wrapping his arms around her, holding her steady as she collapsed once more onto the snow. For a while, all was white and blue and trembling, until new sounds rose, the distant thunder of engines, the bright, shrill wail of sirens. From beyond the trees, headlights stabbed through the storm. Shouts carried over the drifts, rescue workers, police bundled up against the same winter that had nearly claimed Chloe and Josh. Distant but growing closer, the flash of red and blue. The stampede of boots, urgent orders barked into radios. Josh tried to form words, but his lips barely worked. He could only cradle Chloe, pressing her head against his shoulder, while Rex stood sentinel-chest, heaving, eyes wild and glassy. Chloe's tears wouldn't stop. She called for Amanda again and again, until her voice broke, each syllable softer, more fractured, before finally dissolving into shuddering, exhausted silence. The rescuers surrounded them, a blizzard of voices and bright vests. Hands reached out, gloved and careful. Josh tried to shield Chloe's face, but the world had already found them. Cameras flashed from behind police tape. Reporters in parkas jostled for position, microphones in hand. "Is it true?" they shouted. "How long were you underground? Who else survived? What happened down there?" Josh forced himself up, blocking the glare. "She needs a doctor, please. She's hurt. The girl, her name is Chloe Peterson. She needs help." A paramedic knelt beside Chloe, gently prying her fingers from Rex's collar. "You're safe now. You're safe." Chloe flinched, eyes darting between the rescue workers, her mind still searching the storm for Amanda's face. She could only cling to Josh, her body racked by sobs. Rex refused to leave her side, pressing his weight against her as if to anchor her to the living world. The news spread like wildfire, missing for years. The Peterson girl found alive, another survivor with her, a dog nearly as gaunt and battered as the rest. The townspeople, some pale and stricken, others overcome with weeping, formed a ring around the scene. Among them, Josh recognized the faces he'd seen in the diner, their eyes wide and full of fear, and as he realized something close to awe, he saw suspicion flicker in the gaze of an officer. "You said there were others down there." The question hung in the air. Behind the tape, journalists craned their necks, ready to pounce. Josh's thoughts whirled. What could he possibly tell them? That beneath their feet lay a city carved in secret, ruled by a child who had grown into a ghost and prophet. That the legends they had whispered of children stolen of a white ghost were not just stories, but a living wound. That Amanda, the real hero and the real casualty, had sacrificed herself for people who would never know her name. He shook his head, his voice flat, resolved. There was a collapse. Everything's gone. She's the only one I found. His words tasted like betrayal, but he saw Chloe's shoulders relax, just a fraction. She turned, looking up at him through red, swollen eyes. He squeezed her hand. I'm here, I promised. As Chloe was bundled into an ambulance, the chaos around them continued, detectives marking off the site, searchlights blazing across the ruined snow drones buzzing overhead. Josh stayed close, answering only what he had. To pushing back against the questions he knew would bring more danger than healing. He stayed with Chloe through every step, insisting on sitting beside her in the ambulance, refusing to let her out of his sight. In the harsh light of the emergency room, Chloe shrank in on herself. Eyes always searching, never for the nurses, never for the doctors, but for her sister, for some trace of the life she had lost. When they cut the blue sweater from her body, she whimpered. When they tried to take Rex away for examination, she screamed, thrashing, until Josh demanded he stay. Rex lay beside her, refusing all attempts to move him. For days, Chloe drifted between lucidity and fever. Sometimes she remembered everything, the city, Amanda's arms, the cold that never ended. Sometimes she was just a little girl asking for her mother for stories and songs long buried in the snow. Josh never left her side, reading aloud from old books, whispering reassurances. When she wept, he let her. When she screamed, he held her hands and waited for the storm to pass. He saw the questions burning in the doctor's eyes, the way they all wanted a miracle, an explanation. He never gave them one. He guarded the truth the way Amanda had guarded Chloe, a promise that could never be broken. As the days lengthened and the sun grew stronger outside the hospital window, Chloe's color began to return. She spoke more, if only in fragments, always about Amanda. Her scent, her voice, the lullabies she would hum in the darkness. Sometimes, just as she began to sleep, Chloe would reach for Rex's paw or for Josh's hand and whisper, "Don't leave." Not ever. Josh promised her again and again that he wouldn't. And when the world outside came pressing in, demanding answers and turning pain into spectacle, he turned them away. If anyone asked what hope looked like after hell, they would have found it there, in a girl beginning to heal, in a battered dog who still slept at her side, in the quiet watchfulness of a man who knew the greatest story was sometimes the one you refused to tell. And always just out of sight in the space between snowflakes, Amanda's love lingering, a silent benediction under the new light of day. Chloe didn't remember the drive home, only the moment the ambulance doors opened. Cold daylight flooding her eyes and the blur of faces outside, none of them Amanda's. Rex pressed close to her legs, his body a trembling pillar of warmth as she stepped shakily down boots, crunching on frostbitten gravel. It was as if the entire world had been waiting, a crowd of villagers lining the path, search teams and doctors, a ring of television cameras and flashing bulbs kept at bay by a line of police tape. But in the middle, just beyond the safety of the ambulance, stood two people she hadn't dared dream she would ever see again. Her mother, hair now streaked with gray eyes, red and shining, broke from the crowd first. She stumbled across the snow, tears running, unchecked, arms outstretched, as if afraid Chloe might vanish again before she reached her. Chloe nearly fell, her knees buckling, as her mother swept her up, pulling her so close that the world narrowed to the familiar, shaking scent of home. Her father followed slower, limping from old grief, and for a moment he simply stared at her, taking in the way she had changed the years that had been stolen. Then, wordless, he wrapped both Chloe and her mother into an embrace. His hands rough but gentle, his body racked with silent sobs. No one spoke Amanda's name for a long time, as if saying it would shatter this fragile miracle. Chloe's voice was too raw, her heart too heavy. But in every hug, every searching glance, her absence burned the shape of loss, fitting precisely inside every joyous reunion. Chloe looked past her parents' shoulders, searching the crowd, half expecting her sister to step out of the shadows, her eyes bright, her laughter ready to break the spell of grief. But only Rex barked, pushing his head into the circle, his tail wagging wildly, drawing the first choked laughter from Chloe since she'd returned to the surface. The news of her rescue swept through the town like fire in dry grass. But what came next was slower, quieter, a gathering of memory and sorrow. That evening, as the sun set over the snowy roofs, the community came together. Someone Josh never learned who placed 100 candles in the square, each flame a fragile beacon against the early darkness. One for each missing child, each mother, each secret the ice had swallowed. Chloe stood at the edge of the crowd, a blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. Rex at her feet, Josh beside her, silent but steady. The priest spoke softly, his words carried away by the wind, but the meaning was everywhere tonight. They remembered not only those who had returned, but all those still lost, all those who might never come home. For a moment the old feuds and suspicions of the town vanished, replaced by a shared ache and a thin, stubborn strand of hope. When it came time for Chloe to speak, she nearly couldn't. Her hands shook as she stepped to the center, Rex brushing her side, the warmth of his body grounding her. She found her voice only when she thought of Amanda, not as the ghostly figure beneath the ice, but as the sister who had carried her, sung to her, saved her more times than she could count. "I was gone for so long." Chloe began, her voice hoarse, almost breaking. "I thought I'd never see sunlight again. I thought I'd never be found. But I wasn't alone. None of us were ever really alone." Amanda, her voice caught, but she pressed on. "Amanda kept me alive. She kept hope alive for all of us." She looked out at the faces, so many she recognized from childhood, some aged by worry and years. There are others still missing. If you're out there, if you can hear us, don't give up. Don't forget who you are. You can find your way home." Rex barked as if answering her. The crowd broke into applause. A few wept openly, holding each other. Children slipped past their parents to stroke Rex's head, the dog licking each small hand, eyes wise and gentle. Someone tied a blue scarf around his neck, the same shade Amanda once wore. And for the first time, Chloe felt something inside her begin to mend. Reporters surged, hungry for a quote, a headline, an answer. They pressed forward, microphones raised, shouting questions. But Josh stepped between them, and Chloe, his jaw set, voice low and final. No interviews, no more stories. Let her be a person again, not a headline. Chloe watched him, grateful and amazed. He could have told everything, sold every secret for fame, for a book deal. But he shielded her again and again from the glare of the world. And she knew somehow that Amanda would have approved. Over the next days, Chloe began to speak to the town's children sitting on the church steps or by the fire in her parents' kitchen. She answered questions, gentle and slow, about being brave, about fear, about the stories we tell ourselves in the dark. With Josh at her side and Rex always within reach, she became a quiet guide for those who had lost hope, a symbol of return not just for herself but for everyone broken by the cold. Still, every night before sleep, Chloe would light a candle on her windowsill for Amanda, a flame against the endless dark, a promise that memory and love would endure. In time, the villagers began to do the same. And when the spring thaw finally came, Rex, the survivor, the rescuer, the guardian, was the first to leap into the sunlight, a living proof that even from beneath the ice, hope could find its way back. Josh watched all this from the periphery, declining interviews, erasing his name from the bylines. Happy to be just a friend, a protector. He understood that the real ending was not in the headlines, but in the quiet rebuilding of a family, and in the small, stubborn miracles that bloomed each day in the light. They could never bring Amanda back. Some wounds would never close. But in that small Canadian village, under the slow return of warmth, what was lost became at last something found. There are nights when the snow falls so softly on Ontario's empty fields that Chloe wakes with Amanda's name already on her lips. Sometimes she reaches across her pillow for a hand that isn't there, the memory of her sister's fingers woven through her dreams. Amanda's laughter, Amanda's voice, Amanda's arms circling her as the darkness pressed in. She dreams of her beneath the ice, wandering lost corridors, always watching, always protecting. Sometimes Amanda appears in the blue light of pre-dawn, standing on the frozen lake, her hair streaming behind her, pale as the ghost stories children whisper in the dark. Chloe knows it's only a dream, but each time she wakes, weeping her grief sharp and new. Outside, winter lingers. Josh sometimes finds Chloe sitting on the porch, her breath curling and the cold eyes fixed on the distant tree line. She doesn't speak of the tunnels or the rituals or the choices that tore her family apart. But he can see the war inside her, the ache that memory cannot heal, the burden of love left unfinished. Rex presses his muzzle into her lap, a living anchor against the tides of old sorrow. But the shadows have not entirely lifted. The rescue was only the beginning of an unending aftermath. In the months that follow, Josh's instincts as a journalist refuse to sleep. At first he keeps his word, no interviews, no headlines, no betrayal of Chloe's trust. But the story won't let him go. There are patterns he realizes, old stories and missing children names that repeat across the coldest parts of Canada. He begins to gather them: news clippings, police reports, sketches of strange symbols found in ruins, whispers of cults with ancient roots, survivors too broken or terrified to speak. On a frozen morning, Josh drives back to the mouth of the ruined tunnel. The rescue teams have long since departed. Only the wind remains howling through the shattered earth. He finds remnants scattered in the snow, scraps of blue cloth, a rusted lantern, and most chilling of all, the carved mask Amanda wore as prophet of the cycle beneath the ice. He lifts it, brushes away the frost. The paint is cracked, the eye holes empty, but the expression is unchanged, a blankness that both shields and reveals. Near the mask, a battered journal lies half buried. Josh wipes the cover clean, heart pounding as he reads the opening page. We remember the old ways. We keep the cycle. We are not alone under the ice. Inside are lists of names, dates, and strange sigils, maps of pain, trails of memory, echoes of an order that did not die with Amanda. A chill works through Josh, colder than the winter. The cult was not unique to one place. It is a root system sprawling unseen beneath the country, feeding on silent secrecy and the suffering of children. For every city unearthed, a dozen more remain hidden. For every survivor, 100 more are never found. The village tries to heal. Each week, more people venture out at dusk, setting lanterns on their doorsteps, candles at the lake's edge. At first, they are only a handful. In time, the light grows, defying the old stories, the fear that once ruled their hearts. Rex, once a stray, is now a hero. Children beg to pet him, mothers slip him treats, his name a shorthand for courage and survival. Chloe watches all this from a distance, uncertain if she belongs among the living or among the ghosts. But the ghosts are never far. She dreams of Amanda every night, and when the dreams wake her, sometimes screaming, sometimes in tears, she takes a candle and walks to the lake. Alone, but for Rex, she kneels on the thick black ice, the moon reflected in 1,000 tiny fractures. She sets the candle down, its flame trembling in the wind, and whispers her sister's name, the names of all who were lost. For a moment she feels Amanda's presence, warm and vast, as the sky arms around her, the comfort that no cold can erase. Josh stands behind her, keeping watch, holding his silence. He knows there are things he must one day share with the world. The fragments of the journal, the clues to other hidden cults, the hope that more children can be saved. But tonight, he lets the story rest. Tonight is for Chloe, for Amanda, for every secret that still waits beneath the snow. In the end, it is not closure that the town finds, but a fragile peace. The scars of what happened run deep, but so does their capacity for hope. Each candle lit on the ice, each story whispered by Chloe to a child in need, is another promise the darkness will not have the final word. The past can haunt, but it can also teach. And so the legend of the white ghost grows not just as a warning, but as a prayer for all those still searching for the light. And every night, as the cold wind sweeps across the frozen land, Chloe's candle burns on the lake, a single defiant spark against the darkness. The bond of two sisters shining through the centuries of ice. For months, Chloe's world was gentle and careful. A hospital bed near a window, the slow return of sensation to her fingers and toes, the careful hush of nurses and her mother's soft voice reading stories she half remembered from childhood. There were days when she could barely rise, when the cold felt permanent, as if the city under the ice had left frost in her very bones. But the world outside impossibly kept turning. Spring crept back to Ontario in small, persistent ways, sun glancing off the snowbanks, children's laughter returning to the playgrounds, the town square filling with light instead of shadows. Rex, too, was healing. His fur thickened, his wounds faded, and the children of the village doted on him. He wore with pride a hand-knitted scarf in Amanda's favorite blue. He never left Chloe's side, his steady presence a silent vow. When she woke from nightmares gasping for air, it was Rex's warmth that brought her back. In time, Chloe found her voice. It started one quiet evening with a local TV station, just a camera, a microphone, and a single lamp. She spoke softly, pausing often, telling only what she could bear. She spoke of survival, of memory, of the power of one person to keep hope alive in the darkest night. "If you are lost, if you're scared, you are not alone," she said, her eyes shining beneath the studio lights. "There is always someone looking for you. There is always a way back to the light." The interview spread quickly, carried on the evening news, and then online, her story echoing far beyond the snowy village. Messages arrived from across Canada. Letters from families with missing children, from survivors of other terrors, from strangers moved by her courage. Chloe answered as many as she could, her words never grand, always real. She became a symbol, but she resisted letting her pain be turned into spectacle. When talk show hosts called, she declined. She gave her time to those who needed it most. Children in hospitals, families searching for closure, those who walked in the dark and needed a light. Josh, meanwhile, poured his sleepless nights into a book, not just a record of what he'd found, but a call to action. "There are ghosts in every snowy town," he wrote, "and the greatest crime is our silence." His book was part memoir, part investigation, part plea. He named every child he could find, chronicled the hidden histories of lost cults and missing people, and challenged readers to see what lies beneath the ordinary. It was not the story of Amanda or of Chloe, but of a world that had to change if it wanted to save its children. Proceeds from the book went straight to Chloe's new project, a fund dedicated to helping the families of the missing. With the fund, Chloe gave her purpose shape. She visited schools and police stations, stood with parents at vigils, and lobbied for new laws to protect the vulnerable. Her face solemn, luminous, often smiling, despite the ache, appeared beside Rex in brochures on news reports on the website she helped design. The image of Chloe and Rex, standing against an endless field of white snow, became an icon of hope. The local kids started calling Rex the snow hero, and the title stuck. He wore it well. Meanwhile, the village changed. Where once there was only suspicion and silence, people now spoke openly about loss, about trauma, about hope. Neighbors checked in on each other, old rivalries forgotten as new bonds formed through shared pain. Candlelit ceremonies for the missing became regular, at first somber, then with time celebratory. The darkness was not gone, but it had been answered with something stronger. Children ran in the woods again, watched by more careful eyes, and the air was alive with laughter that had not been heard in decades. One afternoon, after a day spent counseling a grieving family, Chloe and Rex walked to the edge of the forest. The world was quiet, save for the wind. Chloe stopped where the trees met the snow, looking into the depths of the wood, toward the place where she'd lost everything and, in a strange way, found herself again. Rex sat beside her, nose lifted to the wind, as if searching for a familiar scent. Chloe closed her eyes, felt the sun on her skin, and whispered Amanda's name. She did not expect an answer, but sometimes in the hush that followed, she thought she could feel her sister's presence, a warmth in the air, a hush in the trees, a promise kept. She knelt, pressed her hand to the icy ground, and smiled through tears. "Thank you, Amanda," she murmured, "for loving me enough to let me go." In the reflection of the snow, Chloe's eyes shone, filled not with grief, but with hope, with the strength to build something new from what remained. She stood Rex at her side and walked back toward the village, the image of survival, of healing, and the unbreakable bond of those who choose always to fight their way back to the light. Winter's last night wrapped the village in a shroud of silence, snow falling heavy and slow, blanketing every rooftop and field with the hush of forgiveness and the ache of memory. The world was washed clean, all edges blurred beneath a sky soft as milk. Chloe stood at the edge of the forest, her breath blooming in the cold. Rex pressed at her side, and the lights of the village behind her flickered in the frost like distant ships on a midnight sea. She had come here for a reason. This was the place where everything had ended and begun again. The trees loomed tall, their branches heavy with ice, forming a cathedral of shadows and silver. Chloe cupped her hands around her mouth, the old ache swelling in her chest, and called into the darkness, "Amanda." Her voice rang out fierce and fragile, echoing through the trees, each syllable a lifeline tossed into the unknown. For a moment there was only silence. Then a whisper, a shifting of wind. The faintest sound that might have been her name carried back to her, soft and uncertain. Chloe closed her eyes, letting the cold bite her skin, letting the memory of her sister's arms, her laughter, her impossible strength wrap her for one more heartbeat. The tears came without shame, burning hot, leaving tracks down her cheeks that the snow could not erase. Behind her, the village square was alive. Tonight was not for sorrow, but for memory candles placed by small hands. Old hands, the hands of the lost and the found. Hundreds of flames were set in the snow, arranged carefully by neighbors and children into the shape of a vast, glowing heart. The light flickered and danced gold and orange and blue, weaving through the darkness, promising warmth even in the coldest night. People stood shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed not in defeat, but in the quiet power of those who have chosen hope again and again. Josh came up beside Chloe, his face pale in the moonlight, eyes raw but gentle. He took her hand, squeezing it with the certainty that comes only from having walked through hell and found someone worth saving. "We're not done," he said quietly, voice rough with resolve. "I'll keep looking for answers. For you, for Amanda, for everyone who still waits in the dark. I promise." Chloe nodded, unable to speak. Her words tangled in the space between gratitude and grief. Rex nuzzled her hand, the only witness who had seen both worlds and survived them both. As the clock struck midnight, the villagers began to sing a song as old as winter itself, soft and full of longing. A melody that wound between the candles and out across the frozen fields. Chloe stepped forward, voice trembling but clear, and spoke for all of them, her words, the closing lines of a story still unfinished. "I don't know where my sister is. Maybe I never will. But I I know she's still out there. Maybe not as I remember her. Maybe she's part of the forest, or the snow, or the hope we find on nights like this. Amanda is hope, and as long as I believe, she's never truly lost." The camera pulls back, rising over the snowbound square. The heart of candles beats gently against the night, Chloe's silhouette framed against the edge of the woods, Rex by her side. Josh just behind a small cluster of warmth and stubborn light. Far beyond, in the shifting drifts, the faint outline of a woman moves between the trees, her coat pale, her hair streaming behind her. She stops just long enough for the moon to find her face. And then she vanishes, swallowed by the snow and the silence, leaving only the promise that love, like hope, can outlast even the longest winter. The wind carried a gentle howl through the empty streets, scattering flakes of snow across windows flickering with golden candlelight. At the edge of the clearing, Chloe stood wrapped in her old coat, Rex pressed against her thigh, both of them silent beneath the white hush that seemed to stretch to the ends of the earth. Her cheeks glistened, but it was not with the wild tears of loss, her eyes rimmed in red. Held a new light, something gentle finally, after so much cold. As the night deepened, she turned her face toward the forest, and for the first time since she had come home, she allowed herself a smile weighed down with grief, but buoyed by something stronger. In the distance, the last of the candles burned in the heart-shaped pattern on the snow, their flames guttering as the wind threatened to snuff them out. Chloe knelt one arm around Rex and whispered her thanks to the dark, to the trees, to whatever force had brought her this far. For all she had lost, she understood now what it meant to remain, how to stand as both survivor and mourner, a keeper of memory and a bearer of hope. She pressed her palm to the snowy earth, feeling the deep cold, and imagined Amanda's hand beneath, always lifting her toward the light. Back at the Peterson home, Josh sat by the soft glow of a desk lamp. The room around him silent, except for the hum of the tape recorder as it captured his final words. He leaned close to the microphone, voice rough but sure. There are places in this world where the cold never truly fades, where old pain lingers beneath the surface and waits for darkness to fall. But love is the truest kind of light, and as long as it shines, no ghost, no shadow, no darkness can claim victory. The ghost beneath the ice may never vanish, but the road home will always be lit by those who refuse to give up on each other. He clicked the recorder off, gathered his notes into a battered box, and looked once more at the newspaper clippings, the sketches, the letters from strangers. It wasn't closure, not really, but it was enough. He stood across the room to the window and watched as Chloe and Rex lingered beneath the lanterns, their shapes small and bright against the empty world. He felt pride and a deep gratitude for having played any part in their return. Outside, the camera drifts, sweeping past the house, where laughter has returned past the town square, where villagers clear away the last waxy stubs past the schoolyard, where children chase Rex across untouched drifts, their shouts of joy carried by the wind. Faces once marked by suspicion now glow with warmth. Arms reach out to mend what was broken. The scars of loss remain, but so does the miracle of coming back together. The past cannot be unwritten, but it can be answered with compassion, with fierce vigilance, with a love that refuses to hide. Music rises a swell of violins and distant voices, old and young, entwined. The camera glides back to the edge of the woods where the snow falls thick, blurring every line between world and memory. Chloe, framed by the silver pines, turns to look one last time over her shoulder, searching the tree line. For a moment there is nothing but snow and shadow. Then a shape subtle and shifting half-real lingers in the distant white, watching with eyes that never stop loving. The screen holds there, suspended. Chloe closes her eyes, breathes in the cold, and lets hope fill her as the future begins. Then the picture fades, leaving only the snowfall, a silent, endless curtain closing over a story that will never truly be finished. The ache is still there, deep and old, but woven through it is something luminous, the knowledge that love, even lost, is never wasted. There will always be ghosts beneath the ice, but there will also always be someone somewhere lighting the way home. The credits roll over white silence, the last notes of music echoing in the heart, and for every viewer, a memory remains of courage, of loss, of sisters of snow, and of the light that endures even after winter's longest night.